Howdy everyone, my name is Moonman, and today we're going to be covering everything we learned about Node Wars in the most recent Ashes of Creation update. Since their live stream was about 3 hours long, I figured I'd put together a shorter video that pulls together all the information they covered. We're going to be covering what exactly a Node War is, and the things that take place during a Node War, unique Node War abilities, or more specifically Mare abilities during Node Wars, how Node Wars are initiated, types of Node Wars, and finally Node War rewards. Before we begin, I just have to say Node Wars look awesome. I absolutely love large-scale battles in MMOs, and they've become more and more stagnant across most MMOs. Great that the Ashes team is focused on bringing back the, quote, massive in MMO, and I'm pretty sure the community agrees that this is absolutely something we want. Let's jump into it. So, what are Node Wars? For a small bit of background on nodes, which is important for understanding why Node Wars exist, nodes are basically towns that exist within the world of Ashes of Creation, and can be developed by players through actions and dedicating resources to upgrade the node. That's just the basic definition, but there's actually a lot more to the system. That said, I don't want to derail us too much, but a node can be upgraded multiple times, can go from a small town all the way to a large metropolis. There will be about 85 nodes that exist in the world. Nodes also have a large effect on how the world develops and can unlock and open various world events as the node progresses. Now that you have that background, Node Wars are exactly what they sound like. These are wars between nodes, or in other words, wars between the player-developed towns and cities. Node Wars themselves are meant to be large-scale open-world battles, and the team has said that they don't want or plan to cap the number of players that can engage in an ongoing Node War. This means there could be hundreds of players that are partaking in the Node War, and dare I say there could even be thousands. Personally, I really hope that during Alpha 2, all the players come together to try and push this to the limit, because optimizing client and network performance is going to be extremely important for ensuring that this gameplay is smooth, and optimizing gameplay around legitimately massive battles is both hard but necessary. An important detail about Node Wars is that when engaging in the war, you will not be subject to the same debuffs that you would get when you regularly die, for instance, no XP debt, and so on. Node Wars could potentially span multiple days, and to win the Node War, you must acquire a number of victory points. In the live stream, this was set to 1,000 points. That may be subject to change. You can acquire these victory points in a couple of different ways. The simplest way being killing a player from the enemy node. Which, by the way, once a Node War initiates, all players from the opposing node will be flagged for PvP against each other until the war completes. Outside of killing enemy players for victory points, which this was 1 point per kill in the live stream, you will also acquire points for completing objectives or events. One important thing to note is that the team did bring up that high-ranking officials of a node may be worth more points than your average citizen, but they didn't go into too much detail. Oh crap, what's this? Another ad for Moonman's Moon Pills?
Are you waiting for a game that may seemingly never come out? Is the copium so strong that you occasionally lose consciousness? Don't you worry. Moonman's Moon Pills are here to save you. These uniquely designed pills will put you into a slumber and wake you up the moment Ashes of Creation is released. Skip the wait and order your Moon Pills today.
Disclaimer, this is just a joke. Don't take sketchy pills from strangers.
The objectives that are part of the Node War will be variable depending on the type of Node War initiated, and we'll discuss Node War types in a little bit, but let's focus on what event or objective we saw in the recent livestream. The Node War event we saw was focused on a point of interest in the enemy node's territory. The importance of focusing on doing Node War objectives is that they provide a significant number of victory points. They also create a way to pull players together from both nodes to battle, which also helps both sides generate more victory points because there will be an absolute onslaught of PvP. Objectives will mostly be at specific points of interest, and it looks like there will be a headquarters for each node that will serve as both a place to congregate and as a respawn point for players. Based on the live stream, there will seemingly be multiple objectives during the event, and what we saw was a kill-based objective as well as a resource collection objective. I mean, they both technically were collecting resources, but one required you to kill NPCs, where the other required you to gather resources from the ground. Finally, once either node has completed the objectives for the event, there is a final objective to complete. In this case, the final objective was channeling the quote God Spike. I don't really know what a God Spike is, but this part of the event was particularly cool to me. There are a lot of really interesting things part of this final objective. Ultimately, it serves as a forcing function to bring all Node War participants together in a final massive battle over a singular objective point. Outside of the final massive battle, it also had a lot of cool mechanics and showcased some unique abilities that are only available during a Node War. We'll get into some of those unique abilities in a bit. Specific to this final objective, for the node that completed the earlier objectives first and were able to begin channeling the God Spike first, there were multiple mobs that spawned that enabled the node that did not complete the earlier objectives first to be able to slow down the channeling time of the God Spike by killing these specific mobs. In this case, there were 4 mobs that spawned, and each one that was killed would slow down the channeling time. According to the team, killing all 4 mobs would increase the channeling time by about double. The other cool thing about this God Spike objective was that it looked like only one person could channel the God Spike. What I like about this is that it enables each node to focus on protecting their channeler and working together to try and disrupt the enemy node from killing their channeler. What wasn't quite clear is if stunning the channeler would interrupt the channel or if the channeler is effectively immune to certain status effects. My assumption is that they would be immune because it would be really annoying to initiate the channel and the enemy could just keep stunning you to keep you from channeling at all. This leads perfectly into our next topic, which was heavily showcased during this final objective: unique abilities during Node Wars, and more specifically, some of the unique abilities that mares will have during a Node War. Outside of the many things mares have when it comes to node control, which we won't dive into, they have a few abilities that are available to the mares specifically and no others involved in the Node War. The team did mention that there may be unique abilities for officers of the node, but didn't go into too much detail and mentioned that there might be some smaller abilities for all players, like a CC break ability potentially. Mares, on the other hand, will have multiple unique abilities, and from what we saw, there were unique mounts, unique mount abilities, and unique buffs that can be applied to your fellow citizens. As far as the unique mount, it looks like mares will be able to ride a flying mount during a Node War. For background, flying mounts are meant to be ridiculously rare, but during the Node War, the mare will be able to fly around. My thought is that this gives the mare the ability to survey and shot call from above the fight. It seems like the Ashes team is expecting the mare to really be the main strategist when it comes to Node Wars. Maybe they think that because this person is very in tune in the administration of the node, that they would also be the best person to strategize for the encounter. I personally think it would be cool to add an option when initiating a Node War or at the beginning of the Node War to delegate a general for the war, and that individual could effectively receive all of the unique mare abilities and of course the flying mount for the duration of the Node War. I just think that this would give nodes and mares more flexibility when it comes to Node Wars, because not every mare is going to be a good battle strategist. That said, this could further politics for a node, because then citizens who may have lost a war previously would weigh how good of a strategist the mare they elect is. Anyways, the unique mount ability we saw in the showcase was extremely impactful. Basically, the ability we saw was a cooldown that enabled the mount to fly up and slam into the ground to stun or trip all enemies within an area around the slam. This definitely is something that could be used very strategically to help disrupt the enemy team at key moments. I'd assume that there will be various unique mount abilities outside of this slam, and maybe the team will enable a mare to choose between a few different abilities at the start of the Node War to create more variability and more option when it comes to strategy for the war. Oh, and one other thing, we did find out that the flying mounts, in this case the dragons, can be targeted and killed by players. The team didn't go into too much detail around this, but it adds more flavor to when and when not to use the slam, for instance. If you slam into a group of enemies, you could risk having your flying mount focused and killed. Also, this flying mount costs resources to spawn for the war. It isn't just a static thing. You'd have to choose to dedicate resources to have this in your pocket, and if it dies during the war, it doesn't just respawn. You'd have to dedicate more resources to spawn another dragon. So there's a lot of risk and reward associated with utilizing the flying mount. The other really cool thing that mares have access to during a Node War is unique buffs that can only be used during the war. One buff we saw was called Battle Roar, and there was another that was shown that I believe increased damage done. These buffs appeared to only last for about 5 minutes and didn't seem to have too long of a cooldown, but their range was quite limited overall, meaning that these buffs are most beneficial when your citizens are stacked closely. So if your citizens are running around in a Zerg, your buff is going to really shine, or if you and the enemy node are lockstepped in a large battle, this buff could potentially help turn the tide. Overall, there's a lot of cool stuff packed into Node Wars. You have potential for massive PvP battles, lots of random PvP taking place between small groups or individuals, node citizens gathering to help with the war objectives or events, unique abilities and mounts only available during the war, so on and so forth. These wars just feel like a great forcing function to get players to interact, for nodes to become more tightly knit. The importance of your node stems further than what the node can do for you specifically, in the sense of crafting stations and quests, etc., but how you will need to rely on your citizens and fellow players a part of the node when you go to battle. I could even see node-specific discords popping up to keep everyone in lockstep when it comes to progressing the node, and especially when a node war seems imminent. Now that we've covered what a node war is and the unique abilities that become available during a node war, I want to take a step back, go into how these wars are even initiated. An important distinction here is that how node wars will be available in Alpha 2 are going to be very different than how they are on launch. Basically, on launch, there will be a reputation system between nodes, and node wars won't be able to be initiated unless reputation has become really bad between nodes. In Alpha 2, that reputation system won't exist, and node wars will be significantly more prevalent. That aside, this is what we learned from Steven and the team. To initiate a node war, your mayor will need to create a commission to the citizens to gather resources to be able to start the war. In other words, the mayor will need to create a quest on the commission board. This is a board of quests that all citizens can accept, and this quest will require citizens to gather some sort of resource to aid in the war effort. There's some implications here. If the citizens do not want to go to war, then they can effectively show their position by either doing the commission, or if they do not do it, then clearly they are against the war. So effectively, you would need a solid percentage of your citizens to do this commission to enable the mayor to initiate the war. The mayor may be in charge of creating the commission, but it's ultimately up to the citizens to decide if they want to go to war or not. An important aspect here is that node war commissions do have a cooldown. The mayor won't be able to constantly commission citizens to aid in going to war. So basically, you won't be able to go to war 24/7 to continue waging war on the same node over and over and over. Now, let's assume for the sake of this video that citizens do want to go to war. Once enough commissions have been completed, the mayor can then choose to initiate the war. When the mayor is initiating the war, there will be various types of, quote, war types that can take place. This is up to the mayor to choose when they initiate the war. The team said they are still working on other war types, but here are the ones that they said are likely to be implemented. We have territory control. Basically claim a part of territory from the enemy node, which effectively siphons node XP from the interest, the territory you took over, and also provides a luck buff in that area to incentivize players to farm in that territory after winning the war. The team didn't exactly name the war types these would be called, but they mentioned a war type that could lead to disabling services in the opposing node, so basically shutting down their crafting stations or things like that. They talked about a war type that could potentially siphon gold from the enemy node. And lastly, a war type that could enable the ability to take over mayorship of a node temporarily, but that mayorship would not encompass everything, which makes sense because you don't want to give someone the ability to completely ruin a node after winning a war. Last but not least, we're going to go through the rewards that can be had by winning a node war. The team mentioned that they wanted to make sure that there was a large incentive for citizens to partake in a war, then there needs to be an immediate incentive. In other words, what's in it for me, right? Some of the war rewards that mentioned were buffs for the winning team, being able to disable enemy services, siphoning gold, temporary mayorship, stealing node XP, and this one being my favorite, enabling new content for the winners, which could mean spawning a raid boss. A quick side note on node wars is that allies to your node can potentially participate in the node war, but the team was adamant on there not being any type of player mercenaries that would exist within the war, so you can't just spend a ton of money and hire as many players as possible to fight for you. That said, there will be NPC mercenaries, it sounds like. That's all I have on Node Wars today. Thank you all for watching, and I appreciate everyone that has subscribed so far. If you're looking forward to more Ashes of Creation content, I got a lot more coming, so go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss out on that. Until I see you next week, Moonman out.